Here comes a new challenger!
Hello there everyone, and welcome to potentially my final Smash speculation video. And in this video, I will be covering the two characters I think are potentially our final two. Now, before I get right into it, I will be streaming my reaction to the Direct, and if you wish to join me, hey, that'd be great. If not, I'll definitely upload my reaction to whoever gets in. I think, hey, why not? It will be fun, right? So, with all that being said, let's get started. The first character I'll be talking about is Isaac from Golden Sun. I wish I could. I really did. Man, talk about the most wanted disaster for me. Maybe next game. Anyways, the character I think that could happen is Master Chief, for the first character I'll be talking about. Now, originally, if you watch my previous videos, you would think I'd be thinking of Crash, but for me, I think it's either Crash or Chief, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's likelier to become Master Chief, and there are reasons why to it. The main one for me is Microsoft and Nintendo's relationship, right? I mean, their business relationship has led to things like Cuphead being on the Switch, us getting Banjo and Steve in Smash, etc., right? And we know, thanks to Phil Spencer, that we can possibly see some things with the Switch and Microsoft in the future, as in one of his videos, I think, or was an image, where you can see the Switch on the background, basically things that he will be covering in the future. And if the Switch is there, then obviously there's going to be some sort of crossover. But not only that, but we may actually have an idea to what that could be. The Fortnite x Apple lawsuit. What a weird way to transition into that. But in that lawsuit, there was apparently details between something of Nintendo and Microsoft, and Nintendo had asked the court to censor all of that. It's quite possible that it's xCloud Game Pass coming onto Switch. It could also be future Microsoft games coming to the Switch, like the long-rumored Master Chief Collection coming to the Switch. I think that would be great, and honestly, it is kind of strange, right? Because we already had Microsoft x Nintendo crossovers before, but, you know, to have essentially Microsoft's like main money makers, the Game Pass, xCloud, stuff like that on the Switch would be amazing. And who knows, maybe Microsoft is working with Nintendo on the Switch Pro. That's just me speculating. That's not necessarily the case, nor does it have to be. It's just me speculating. But why Chief? You know, we already have Steve in this past and Banjo in the last one, so why would Chief get in if we already have a Microsoft rep? My argument to that is that when you think of Banjo, you think of Rare and Nintendo. When you think of Minecraft, you think of Mojang and Minecraft. Neither one would you ever really think of Microsoft, even though they own both IPs. So for me, I think that if Microsoft were to get an actual rep, it would be one that not only represents Microsoft, but the Xbox brand in general. And what character does that better than Master Chief himself? When you think of Chief, you think of Microsoft, you think of the Xbox. And so for me, it makes too much sense to have Chief be that actual representative for Microsoft. And because of Minecraft giving an opportunity to Banjo, I could see something similar happen with Chief, where maybe because of the connections that Nintendo and Microsoft have, that Chief can actually make his appearance in Smash. I think it would be wonderful and just outright amazing to have this character be featured. And me personally, even though I don't have much history with the Halo series, seeing Chief would be amazing. It'd be something that, even if I kind of expect it to happen at some point, just seeing it would be different from, you know, thinking it'll happen. It just feels so unreal still, you know? But hey, that's just my opinion, and maybe there can even be other Microsoft related things that come with Chief, not just Halo, but maybe like other Microsoft and potentially Rare Mii costumes. I always found it strange that the only Mii costumes we got from Microsoft's end was just Minecraft Mii costumes and Cuphead. That was kind of strange. Obviously Bethesda is now owned by Microsoft, so we could see things like Doom and other Bethesda brands alongside Chief, if Chief were to happen. As much as I would hate it, because like I love Doom, you know, and I love Doom Guy, but if I had to pick between the two, I'd play Chief a little more than Doom, you know, but the Doom games are definitely fun. But you know, that's just how things are. And at this point, like I said, if you're gonna have a character that represents Microsoft, you're choosing Chief. There's no question about that. Master Chief 100% I think is quite possible, but just as a fair warning before I continue on to the next character I'll be talking about, if I say a character's happening, or in my opinion a character's happening, it's just my opinion. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I really don't care in this instance. I just really think that it's possible, and for me personally, I just think it'd be cool to have Chief. Again, Chief essentially is a rival to Mario in that sort of space, right? Console wars, if you want to use that phrase. I just think it'd be cool to have it. It'd be similar to how when Sonic joined back in Brawl. I think it'd be great. And for the next character I'll be talking about, it's Ryu Hayabusa. I've talked about him so much, so this will be the final for real time that I'll be talking about him, unless he gets into Smash, and then obviously I'm going to talk about him a whole lot more. But for right now, let me just get one thing out of the way. If you want to learn more about Ryu Hayabusa as a character, I highly suggest checking out the Black Masadote's video on who is Ryu Hayabusa. It goes over his lore and character much better than I ever can, and so please watch that video if you want to learn about Ryu Hayabusa. Maybe you might be convinced on actually, you know, checking him out, and maybe you'll be more hyped for Ryu if he were to actually be revealed. So please, one more time, check out that video. Now let's talk about my personal relationship to the Ninja Gaiden series. With Halo, I don't have much to say, outside of me just playing, you know, LAN on my school computers back then. But when it comes to Ninja Gaiden, I've played the NES games, I've played the 3D games, I've played Dead or Alive, I've mained Ryu in those games. I've played so many things involving Ryu that I have a personal attachment to this character ever since I was a child. I love Ryu, I love his design. Just something about him is so cool and unique that no other character shares, in my opinion, from other games that I've played in terms of their main protagonist. I've played a lot of games, and to me personally, none ever feel as cool as Ryu is. And I mean cool that's actually cool and not like cheesy kind of cool, you know. I would give examples, but I wouldn't want to make people upset, so I'm not gonna bring examples, you know. So let's just continue on to the rumors and leaks sort of thing. When it comes to those, however, there aren't much, but there are two big players I want to mention. One is Virgibin, the other one is I Am Shifty. Virgibin said that Koei Tecmo and Nintendo indeed had talks about Smash, and I Am Shifty said that Ryu would be the final character of the first pass. That obviously didn't happen, but what makes things interesting is that if you look at Shifty's history and go through his videos, in which I highly implore you to do, he has gotten things right, one of which being Piranha Plant. I do believe that he legitimately heard Ryu was coming to Smash, but quite possibly Ryu was sort of planned early, or Koei Tecmo had deals very early on with Nintendo that when he heard Ryu, he probably thought he was going to be the next character instead of Byleth. And I want to make one thing clear. Koei Tecmo would not have any involvement with Byleth. When it comes to Byleth, Sakurai would likely have already had the game beforehand, and when it comes to first-party characters, Sakurai doesn't really need the help of the main developer. Of course, if the developer wants to give off a certain interpretation of a character, or they can give the okay to Sakurai, then that's fine, but at the end of the day, Sakurai doesn't have to give any hoots to any first-party companies because it's owned by Nintendo. I mean, if developers really cared about the characters, how they're represented in Smash, Ganondorf would not be a Falcon clone, you know what I mean? Or Falcon semi-clone, whatever, technical terms, Sam, technical terms. But just want to make that clear. When it comes to third parties are heavily involved in the development of the character because they need to approve. They are the ones that hold the rights, and therefore they need to oversee how the character is designed and made. Similarly to Mortal Kombat 11, they needed, Ed Boon had to go back to third parties that he got characters like the Terminator as an example. He needed to go back to the right holders and ask them, is this okay, when it came to his friendship. They said, hey, it's okay, there you go. So when it comes down to it, third parties are heavily involved into the characters that they own, and therefore, for my personal opinion, I don't think Koei Tecmo had any involvement with Byleth's inclusion, nor do I think that the meetings between Nintendo and Koei involve the assist trophy, because Fatal Frame, whilst it wasn't with Nintendo at first, it has essentially become a co-owned series. It didn't start off as that, right? It was a series that was kind of on its standalone, but Nintendo's the only company that is financially supporting that franchise, so you might as well consider it a joint owned franchise between Koei Tecmo and Nintendo. And the last one is Age of Calamity Spirits. I think that the Hyrule Warriors thing is the reason why Koei Tecmo's name is on that, but otherwise, when you really take a look at Smash's history with Koei Tecmo, we haven't gotten anything Koei Tecmo related since base game, unless you want to count the spirits, and even then, all those characters featured on the spirit board are owned by Nintendo. They're not owned by Koei Tecmo. It's just the Hyrule Warriors name, and I highly doubt Nintendo and Koei would have to hold a big meeting just to have a logo in the game. You know what I mean? I find that kind of ridiculous. Now let's talk about the interviews. So Yoshida of Team Ninja had 6 interviews for the past few months now, and there are some unique things when looking at these interviews. Out of the 5 of 6 interviews, 5 of those mention Smash. The last one doesn't. What makes that last one interesting is that that is the only one Koei Tecmo has retweeted compared to the other interviews. The first 5 interviews, by the way, were obviously very much talked about as seen as the Ryu killer, quote unquote, and so it is kind of interesting that the ones that bring up Smash, Koei Tecmo gives no attention to, but the one time there is no Smash featured, they retweet it. I find that interesting, but out of the 5 interviews, 4 of them say the same line, waiting for our invitation. The third interview that came out said no. They basically said no, and people took that as Ryu's dead, whereas waiting for our invitation is kind of vague, right? Now, in my personal opinion, I find that these interviews coming so close together in release is very interesting. Who's to say that that third interview wasn't the last interview that Yoshida took? We never know. We don't know. So in my personal opinion, I wouldn't really take that as death to Ryu. Maybe because he's under NDA, he said waiting for invitation, and because of what he was saying, Nintendo asked him, hey, just say no for any questions involving Ryu, and maybe for that last interview, you know, he said no, and therefore, bada boom, you know, he just basically said no, right? Like, there are no plans for Ryu in Smash. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the other 4 waiting for invitation, mind you, it's the same exact thing he said, waiting for invitation. I find that strange that only one of them sticks out of the ones that bring up Smash, so be mindful of that. Then again, I don't really pay attention to many interviews at all, because I feel like interviews, people lie in them. They can just be spewing out lies without even knowing, and even then, I highly doubt Yoshida would have much involvement with Ryu's inclusion in Smash. Koei Tecmo is the one that deals with all of that, the higher-ups in Koei Tecmo. And when you look at other crossovers with, you know, Koei Tecmo IPs, you don't see Team Ninja's name attached to it. I just want to make that clear. And one last thing I want to make clear is Nintendo's approach for the Nintendo Direct reveal of the Master Collection. According to Yoshida, he said that Nintendo approached them for the Direct to reveal this game and that the timing is right, so they revealed Ninja Gaiden for Switch, you know, the Master Collection, and it is out right now of the time I'm recording this video. So hey, if you haven't, please get the games. They are amazing. And now, finally, let me talk about version D theory. This is a theory I've had on my channel once or twice, talked about before, and it has even been featured on Papa Genos's channel once or twice before. So let me just sum it up all here right now. First, that Nintendo thing. Nintendo did approach them to feature the game on the Direct, but for some of you may not know, Master Collection in Japan has a version D, and that was the one that was marketed in the Direct. What makes things interesting about this Ninja Gaiden Master D version, or version D, however you want to call it, this game was the only thing they showed in the Japan Nintendo Direct. And if Nintendo approached them, it is kind of weird that they would have a version D game, especially when the base game, which is rated Z, is still being released on the Switch along with the PS4 or PS5, Xbox, and Xbox Series X. Now, for those who don't know, Sero has a rating system A, B, C, D, and Z. Z is 18 plus and older, D is 17 plus and older. So, when you really think about it, version D, alright, so Nintendo approached them. In the Japan Direct, they had version D. Now, according to them, the timing was right, so they were just making it. Obviously, these things take time to prepare. But the thing about version D is that it's its own separate game, which, by the way, only censors one aspect of the game, and that is Ninja Gaiden 3. Now, there was a video, it's unlisted, but in that video, which I will link in the description below, it has some product information, and if we translate it here, it basically says that Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 are not changed, but 3 is, and only one scene according to the translation. Now, this could be because apparently Switch players are sensitive. That's what they said when talking about version D. But I think that's a lie. And why do I think that's a lie? Well, for those who don't know, Ninja Gaiden 3 was released in 2012 on the Wii U. It was released on other systems later on in Japan, but outside of Japan, it was released only on the Wii U as a launch title because, well, Nintendo published it outside of Japan, except in Australia, I think, from what I remember doing my research. But still, Nintendo, especially during the Wii U era, was very censorship heavy, and so you would think that they would make a censored version of Ninja Gaiden 3, which was still rated Z in Japan, but they didn't. So I find it interesting that the more censorship era of Nintendo was not given a censored version of this game. Again, this is 2012 Nintendo we're talking about. 2012 Nintendo is much different from 2021 Nintendo, just to be clear on that. So I found it interesting that they made a censored version that only censors the one game that they didn't censor before on a Nintendo system. But not only that, if Nintendo approached them to have featured this game on their Direct, it is strange when you think about the amount of time it would take for a Direct to be made would probably be like at most 3-4 months, potentially, right? Like that far planning ahead. I highly doubt that Koei Tecmo would just make a brand new game just for the Nintendo eShop, which by the way, it's only in the Nintendo eShop in Japan, for just to make this brand new, completely different game that only censors one scene when you could have just made it an option in the base game and have it ready for a Direct that would come out. Who knows, maybe it wasn't even a few months before. It could have been 3 months, 2 months, even 1 month before Nintendo would have approached them. And that timing seems strange because there's no way that Koei Tecmo would have a version D game ready for Nintendo to market. I think that is very, very suspicious. The timing is just too good on Koei Tecmo's end. But why do I think they even made a version D in the first place? Well, in my opinion, I think version D was made specifically for Ryu and Smash. Now I know games aren't made for Smash. Smash just markets games. But here's my opinion. I think it's completely ridiculous for Koei Tecmo to now say that they wanted to release a censored version when, again, it wasn't on the Wii U, right? Another thing, version Z, Z-rated games cannot be marketed as well as the previous 4 A, B, C, and D. In my opinion, I think that they made this version D so they can market it on the Nintendo Smash website, because under DLC characters there are links to their games, which you can play and purchase and enjoy their first adventures, possibly, right? But Sab, I hear you asking, can't they just put the original Ninja Gaiden on there? No, and here's why. The reason why the original Ninja Gaiden cannot be on the Smash website is because that's on Nintendo Switch Online. That would directly support Nintendo, not Koei Tecmo. Plus, when it comes to this collection, these are Ryu's first adventures before Ninja Gaiden 1. There's a reason for that, but I'm not going to spoil it for you, alright? Because, hey, the game's out right now, play it yourself. But if you know anything that happens at the end of the NES game, these are prequels to that game. Therefore, this is Ryu's first adventure, and therefore marketing it would still make sense, in my opinion. And just to be clear, on the US side of things, they could also put a disclaimer, Ninja Gaiden Master Collection rated M by the ESRB. Similarly, what they did with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, when Pyramithra were revealed, if you go to their Smash page, you'll see that it says Xenoblade Chronicles 2 rated teen by the ESRB. Now, I find that interesting that they added that, especially when Final Fantasy VII was rated teen. It is mentioned in the music listings, but is not under Sephiroth, which is what I find interesting. Because if they were consistent with this, they would have put it for Sephiroth. Not only would they put it for Sephiroth, they would have done it for Terry, Byleth, you know, so I just find it a little bit strange that they just finally added this disclaimer when they could have done it much longer beforehand. But hey, I mean, that's just me seeing things a little bit strange. I mean, that's just my opinion, right? So yes, I do think that this Master Collection version D was made for Nintendo, for Smash, for Ryu in Smash. That is a huge conspiracy theory, I know, but it is what I believe, and so hopefully, you know, Ryu makes it in, and hopefully this theory was correct. Bada boom, you know. Plus, I should make it clear, this censored version of the game won't be on PS4 or Xbox. Japan doesn't have a Steam, so it would only be on those two consoles. And if people want to argue it's for marketing reasons, then why not put it on those other two platforms when you could easily market from the PlayStation and Xbox side of things? Again, I just find it a little bit strange, a little bit peculiar. I don't want to use the little SUS word, alright? I will ban that word. But with that all being said, those are my reasons for why I think Ryu's in. And as for Chief, yeah, it wasn't as much. I don't have much to go on. I just found that this version D game is so different, so strange, so weird that it's being made. Again, we're in the era where Nintendo's not censoring anything, and for this version of the game to exist makes no sense to me. But with all that being said, I hope to see what lies at E3, and I hope you guys can join me as I will be live streaming it. Let's reach 1,000 subs before the end of the year. I know it's possible. It's even possible for us to reach it before the end of the summer. So please subscribe, like the video, comment. I'll respond to your comments 1,000,000%. I'll just answer any questions you may be having. Of course, this is all one big conspiracy, but when has Smash never been a conspiracy? So with all that, hope to see you in my next video. Peace.
Coming through, partner, we can do this right. You're the fire, I'm the wind tonight. Burning dread, haha.